Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. I declare that there is none worthy of worship other than Allah, and that the Prophet Muhammad is the final messenger of Allah. You see, for every Muslim, this is a simple declaration of faith, and when we say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. But we need to understand what we really mean when we say this. And so today, the youth are worried what they must choose, what careers they must choose, where they must go, what car they want, what motorbike they want, what bicycle they want, or skateboard. There are many choices and many distractions for the youth today. And so if you're a young person and you're watching today, you might wonder what you want to build on for your future. What is it that you want for your future? And so today I want to talk about something that's very important, and that is building the house of Islam. Now some of you already are thinking this is going to be a very deep conversation, and maybe you'd rather go do something else. But I challenge you to sit and listen for a while to a unique approach of understanding the practices and the life of Islam, how you can live it, how you can practice it, and how you as a young person can enjoy Islam. And so you need to understand that Islam is an exciting adventure. If you look behind me, you see a building. It's all held together with bricks and mortar, and this whole building is stable and it's strong, and it's not going to fall down. If an earthquake comes, it will stay stable because it's built properly. The foundations were built properly, the walls were built properly. It had to have special plans. You had to submit plans to the planning department, which they had a look at, and they said, fine, these plans are right, you're going to build it according to a certain code and a certain way. So this building is very stable. But however, in some countries, when there's an earthquake or an earth tremor, what happens? The whole building collapses because it wasn't built properly, or because it wasn't checked properly, or because there wasn't a certain code that the building was built on. So today I want to have a look at what do we need as young Muslim people to build a strong, firm, secure Islam. How do we build something that will not fall when the earthquakes come his way? How can we build a building that even when the floods come, even when the rains come, even when it sounds really vicious outside, we know that we are secure inside and our building is going to stand strong. So what are the two basic things that we need to build our Islamic faith on? First of all, we need the Holy Qur'an. And the Holy Qur'an is going to give us the building manuals, how we're going to build, what we need to use in our building construction, how much it's going to cost, how long it's going to take. Everything that we need to know for building this great strong fortress that we're going to build is found in the Holy Qur'an. And along with that, we need the building plans, we need the approval, we need the advice of architects, we need the advice of those who are going to actually do the contracting work for us, and that we find in the Sunnah. So the Quran and the Sunnah are basic beginning starting blocks. We cannot start building this building without these two things. And this is the foundation. With these two, with the Sunnah and the Quran, we can build our foundation on top of that. Only then are we ready to start. But there's something else that has to happen. You see, whenever you look at a building site, or you see someone building a home or a house or a skyscraper, you see that the hardest work is the beginning part. When they actually built the foundation, everything seems to go up very quickly. But there's a little job that we need to do, a little task that we need to do before we can even lay those foundations down. And that is, we need to remove all the rubble and all the rubbish that is there. So sometimes you get onto a lot and you find that people have used it as a garbage heap. They just threw their rubbish there. Maybe an old car was parked there, a motor vehicle was parked there. Maybe people have built squatter camps there, whatever. And we have to remove those squatter camps. We have to remove those old cars. We have to remove the rubbish there. And then we start digging away, and we dig and dig and dig until we find a nice solid, maybe rock or foundation, where we are going to build on. And that is what we are going to do today. We're going to have a look, inshallah, how we remove that rubble. How do we remove all those things before we can get to the Sunnah and the Quran? Now, what we need to do is we need to get to a point in our lives where we realize that the way our lives look at the moment is not good. There's an old car parked in our life. There's rubble and rubbish that has accumulated over the years. We wanted to do things our way, and we've built squatter camps or houses that are not going to stand very firm. We rebuild them every few weeks and every few months. And so we look at our lives and we go, what have I done? How did I get to this point where I allowed this to happen in my life? And so what we do is we start to remove these things. And we've tried on our own. What happens? We try on our own and we fail, and then we give up. And then we build another house of cardboard and it falls down. And then we build a house made of tin and it falls down. It's almost like the story of the three little pigs. And each one tried to build his own way, and it just kept falling down. Now, How do we build these firm foundations? We first need to realize that we cannot do it on our own. We realize that we've tried on our own, it doesn't work. Like I say, we tried to build it on our own and we found that it doesn't work. And so what we need to do is we need to realize that we have to give our lives over to Allah. Remember, Allah, God is in control of everything. Every part of our lives we have to submit to Allah. And this is one of the hardest things to do. Submission is a very difficult thing to do. And as young people, you know that submitting is not easy. When your father or your mother tells you things, you feel inside of yourself that you want to rebel. And so it's not an easy thing for us just to submit once we get older. When we were young, when we were a baby, it was easy for us to submit. When our father stood there and he had his arms outstretched and you were standing on a wall and he told you to jump to him, you didn't think twice, you jumped because you trusted that your father was going to catch you. When your mother was feeding you or looking after you when you're a young boy and you walk past, or young girl when you walk past, you would reach your hands out to your mother because you wanted to submit to your mother. You wanted to do this because this is the character that you had. You had a character of total trust and submission. But as the years went by, you learned not to submit anymore and you started becoming rebellious and you wanted to do your own thing. If you look at if it's a characteristic of people to submit or not, have a look how many people join national service or the military. How many people voluntarily go join the national service? See, a lot of people don't join the military or national service because they don't want to submit. They don't want to listen to someone in authority over them. And those who do, they're very few, because many of those people who do join the military have an idea that one day they will be leaders or they'll be in charge and other people have to submit to them. So sometimes people submit because they want to be on a power trip or they want to be an authority one day. Now this is not the type of submission that we have in Islam. This type of submission that we have is that we want to voluntarily become servants of God, servants of Allah. Now what we mean by servants also needs to be explained, because in some cultures and some religions, servants are brainless wonders. They just wander around chanting and meditating and doing things without thinking. This is not the type of servants that Allah wants. This is not the type of servants that we are going to sign up for. What we are signing up for when we become Muslims is the type of service where we know exactly why we are doing each thing, why we perform the things we do, why we say the things we do. We have to know the cost. So when we are beginning to build this foundation on the Sunnah and the Qur'an, we have to remove these things and we have to know why we're removing them. And the only way we can remove them is by saying, Allah, I have tried it my way. I have tried to do things the way I think is best, and what happened? It failed time and time and time again. You know, many people, they say, I want to stop smoking, or I want to stop taking drugs, or I want to stop drinking alcohol, or I want to stop womanizing, or I want to stop being so disrespectful to my parents, or disrespectful to my wife or my husband. And they cannot do it. It's because they haven't got to the point where they've actually said, if I try it on my own, it fails, it doesn't work. Now I want to hand it over to you, Allah, because you're the only one who can deal with it. You're the only one that can give me that strength and that power to overcome this problem that I have. So you totally submit. You submit even your wrongdoings, your good, everything over to Allah, and you allow Him to take control of it. And so submission means that you say, I am unable to do it only through the power and the ability of Allah. Allah Ta'ala is the only one who can show you and guide you and help you. So now we've got to that point. Now we've realized that we don't know how to do this project, and we search for advice and help how to do this project of building this mansion or this house that's going to protect us against all the elements. Then only after we submitted and said, Allah, I realize that there is only one God, you alone. There is none other. You have to realize the oneness of Allah. So the first step on building this foundation, once we have the Sunnah and Quran, is realizing that we need to submit totally to the oneness of Allah. So we do that now and we say, Allah, I realize that there's no one else worthy of worship other than you. There's no one else I can put my trust in other than you. And so I surrender totally, 100% to your will. And then we can start building the foundations. So now we say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. We are beginning with the building. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to realize that there is a hereafter. There is a hereafter that we are preparing for. So why would somebody want to join the military? Why does somebody want to join up in the military and submit to somebody screaming and shouting and telling him what to do 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Why would he do this? Because he has faith in what's going to take place in the future. He trusts in the hereafter. He knows that after this basic training, after all I have to go through here in this training, I'm going to be moved up. I'm going to be trusted. And when I'm trusted in the military, they're going to give me authority. They're going to give me a certain trust. So maybe the first level that you move up, you only get one little line on your shoulder, on your arm, and it just means you're a corporal. It means you're trusted with a certain amount of responsibilities. And as you're trusted more and more in the military, so your ranking goes up and you're trusted with more and more responsibilities. You don't own the army. You are not the army. You are part of the army. And so it is with Allah. Once He trusts you and He sees that you have been faithful, and once He sees that you have understood what it means to be a Muslim, you are trusted and you're given more and more responsibility, and you're given more and more tasks to fulfill. And so the more you know, the more you are trusted, and the more you're answerable before Allah. So we must be careful, because we have to do things slowly. We can't just rush ahead and try and finish the marathon before you even started training to do the basic type of running. So no one lets you run a marathon, 80 kilometer marathon or 100 kilometer marathon, without first putting you some basic training. So first step first is trust in the oneness of Allah. Second is we prepare for the life hereafter. So we trust in the life hereafter. We are given certain responsibilities to fulfill. Once we are trusted, we're given more and more responsibilities. But these responsibilities are to prepare us for the hereafter. We, as Muslims, the basic foundations are, the second one is the belief in the hereafter. The third one is that we accept the prophethood. In other words, we respect all the prophets that came before. All the prophets up to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. We respect all the prophets that came before, and we realize that we can only follow the role model of these great men that have built the foundation. They've shown us how to build the solid foundation. They've shown us through the Sunnah. They have shown us through the Qur'an how we should live. So we don't have to go blindly and think, oh, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know how I'm going to live this Muslim life. The only way we can really get a strong understanding is to go through the Qur'an and Sunnah. We're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we're going to continue having a look at how to build a strong foundation as young people in Islam, inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. We are looking at how to build a firm foundation as young people to build this faith of Islam effectively. And just to have a quick recap, we said that we need to have belief in the oneness of Allah, we need to prepare for the hereafter, and we need to believe in the prophethood. And to go over these foundations again very quickly, the Sunnah and the Quran, they hold this whole foundation together. If we remove the Sunnah and the Quran, we have no foundation that's going to hold this together. We're not going to understand the oneness of Allah because we're going to have no text to follow. We're not going to understand the prophethood because we're not going to know anything about the prophets if we don't know, and peace and blessings be upon them all. We're not going to be able to find them because we don't have these texts to follow. And the promise of the hereafter is only found in the Sunnah and the Quran, so we need to follow these texts. So you see the foundation, the clearing of the way of these foundations that we are building this solid house on, are first making sure that the Sunnah and Quran are there. They're the excavation team. They come and clear away all the rubble of our previous living, the way we lived before. And then we build the hereafter, and we build the prophethood, and we build the oneness of Allah onto this. So now we see in the Quran, in Quran 100, if we take the Quran and we pick it up, we should all have a copy of the Quran. We open the Quran and we can have a look at the 112th chapter of the Quran, chapter 112 and verses 1 to 4. And it says, "Say, He is Allah, the one and only, Allah the eternal and absolute. He begets not, nor is He begotten, and there is none like unto Him." This is the most important understanding that we need to get when we understand the oneness of Allah. You see, it says here, He is Allah, the one and only. You see, many people will say, we believe in God, we believe in one God. But when we get down and ask them questions, we find that they add Vishnu and other gods, and Christians, they had Jesus, peace be upon him. And many religions, they add something else. And we have to be very, very cautious, even as Muslims, that we don't add as well. Sometimes people say, yes, we believe La ilaha illallah, but we're praying to saints or we're praying to others, and we think there's someone else is going to find a way through to God for us. No, there is only one and only. Tawheed, the basic first step, the oneness of Allah, means there cannot be anybody else. There's no other medium that you go through. Not a human being, not a saint, nothing. There is no one else other than Allah. So it says here very clearly in verse 1, it says here, "Say He is Allah, the one and only." One and only, there is no other. Otherwise you'd have said, I'm one of the many, or one way. He said, no, I'm the one and only. And then it says, He is Allah, the eternal and absolute. Eternal is a very important thing here. It means He cannot have a beginning and He cannot have an end. He's eternal. He will continue forever. He can't die for a week or a day or an hour and then be born again, or brought back to life again, like Christians try to show that Jesus did. He died and then 3 days later came back to life. Then He's not eternal. And then the next part, He says, He begets not, nor is He begotten, which is directly opposing Christian doctrine, because many Christians will say that Jesus is the only begotten Son of God. We see that God cannot have sons, He cannot have daughters, He cannot have children, He doesn't have cousins or uncles or relatives. He is the one and only. He stands by Himself. and there is none like unto him. So no one can be compared to him. He has no competition. There's no one near. He stands all on his own. He does not need any other. And so we see that the basics that you need to build on is the oneness of Allah. This is the first thing we've understood. Now we move on to the life hereafter. Once you've understood Tawheed, you understand that there's no other that we trust in this building this foundation and excavating this land to make a solid building that we're going to build. We have to understand the hereafter. There is no other that governs our life. There's no other that guides our life to the hereafter. We trust in and have complete faith and trust in Allah. So if we look again in the Quran in chapter 19, and if you have your Quran, make sure you mark it. Chapter 19, verse 93. And it says in verse 93, it says, "There is none in the heavens and the earth, but comes to the most gracious as a slave." In other words, we have to come to Allah the most gracious as a slave. Now this word slave here is such an important word, because sometimes we get the idea that we can choose to be a slave to Allah or we can be free. You're a slave to the system. You're a slave to the world. You see, you have only one choice in life. You're already a slave. When you learned to disobey Allah and you started rebelling and doing your own thing, you chose to become a slave of the world. You chose to become a slave of the material things of this world. And so you now have to make the choice to return back to Allah. That's why we use the word revert. We don't say the word convert, we say revert, because you're already in a state of submission to Allah. Then you learn to be disobedient. Now we need to return back to what we originally were. So when you have to make a choice, the choice is to return or stay the way you are and go the way you are. So you're already a slave to the system, you're a slave to the world, you're a slave to sin, you're a slave to wrongdoing. Choose to return back. Choose to become a slave. A slave in this sense is not somebody who's whipped and beaten and badly treated. This is a slave who wants to return to his master because he loves his master. His master gave him everything that he needed, everything that he wanted. And then we go on to verse 94. It says, "Verily, I know each one of them." He knows every one of them. "And have counted them a full counting." So Allah knows everything about us. And there's nothing that He doesn't know. Sometimes people will say, young people, we say, Allah can't possibly know what I'm going through as a young person. The trials and the tribulations and the fears and the anxiety, temptations. Allah knows everything. He has counted them fully and He knows them. They're fully accounted for. And every one of them will come to Him alone on the day of resurrection. Very important. You see, if we're preparing for the hereafter, we must understand that every one of them, every one of us, every one of you will come alone on the day of resurrection. There will be no helper, there will be no protector, there will be no defender. You will come alone. You see the Christian concept of this day of judgment or the hereafter. They say that Jesus will be the defense attorney. The Prophet Isa, peace be upon him, will be the defense attorney, and he will be there and he will defend you. Here we see in the Quran, no, we are going to stand alone. We've had the opportunities to listen to the prophets. We've had the opportunity to listen to the Sunnah and the Quran and live that way. Now it's time for the final case. We are now going to be judged on what we did with that information. There's no other chance for another defense attorney to come out at that time. This is the time. While we're alive, we have to prepare for the hereafter. So we can't waste our time. Not one human being on planet Earth will have somebody else defending him at that day. We will stand on our own and we'll give an account on our own for the actions that we performed on this time that we were alive here. So this is an exciting time, but it's also a terrifying time, because what we do here now, the building blocks that we put into practice in our life now, are going to talk on our behalf on that day. You see, what type of building are we going to take? What are we going to show Allah to Allah when we stand before Him one day in the final judgment, on the day of reckoning, when everything is brought out into the open? What is our building going to look like? Is it going to be a mobile home that we just hitch onto the back of a car and bring forward? Is it going to be a mansion? Is it going to be something made of straw? Or is it going to be solid? So we're still looking at the foundations that we need to build. And then in future episodes, we're going to go deeper into having a look at this perfect building that you need to make. And obviously, it's all depending on the will of Allah, if He allows us to build it this way. But He wants all of us to come closer and closer, to search more and more, to get to know the Quran fully, to understand the Sunnah. So the next part of this foundation is prophethood. So we looked at the oneness of Allah, Tawheed, that we need to understand why we say La ilaha illallah. Second, we looked at the hereafter, how we need to plan and prepare for it. And then the third thing is that we need to look in the Quran at what the Quran says about prophethood. Now in the 13th chapter of the Qur'an, in verse 7, it says here, a beautiful verse, and it says, "But thou art truly a warner, to every people a guide." In other words, thou art, talking about Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he is a warner, one who's going to tell us what's going to go wrong in our lives if we continue to be slaves to the system, if we continue to be slaves to the world. And that to every people a guide was sent. Now many people come up and they say, what about that guy who lives on an island all by himself, deserted in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, or the middle of the Indian Ocean, or the middle of the Gulf Ocean? What about him? He was never sent prophet. The Quran says that everyone will have a prophet sent to his people at his time. We know this from those who study the Sunnah and study the Quran, or even have the vaguest, smallest understanding of it, know that a messenger was sent to everybody. It wasn't just 5 or 6 messengers that were sent over a period of time. Thousands of messengers were sent. Thousands of people were sent to warn people of what would come. So they are truly the warners. To every people was sent a guide. You see, they are telling us what we need to do to change. That we need to, 1, understand the oneness of Allah. 2, understand that we need to prepare for the hereafter. 3, we have to understand the prophethood. These prophets weren't just sent to make noise and to try and tell people that they need to stop doing those things. They were sent here as warners, to warn you about what would happen if you continue to do these things wrong. If we look at the story of all the prophets that we find within the pages of the Holy Quran, we find that they all try to beg and plead the people to do what is right, to forbid them from doing what is wrong, and to turn to do what is right. Today we are being told by Muslim scholars, great Muslim scholars, the same thing, and we're not listening. We're not listening to what the Quran says. We're not listening to what the Sunnah says. We cannot stand on the day of resurrection, on the final day when we prepare for the hereafter, and say that we didn't know, that we didn't listen. So you see, this foundation is extremely important. We have to have the oneness first. We have to have preparation for the hereafter, and we have to respect the prophets. If we remove any of these things, and we choose only to listen to the oneness of Allah, and we choose only to prepare for the hereafter, but we do not listen to the prophets, what will happen? The building will collapse. As soon as a storm comes, it will fall down. As soon as an earthquake comes, it will fall down. The slightest bit of wind, it will fall down. Anything that happens in our life that we haven't built our foundation strongly on, it will fall down. But what are these beams that have been put deep into the ground to hold it firm? It's the Sunnah and the Quran. The Sunnah and Quran are firmly rooted in the ground. Then we have the foundation. And that cement that is put down, that is built, is Tawheed, the oneness of Allah. That there is none other, that there is no other God worthy of worship other than Allah. The second, we need to understand the prophethood. And the third is that we need to understand that we need to prepare for life hereafter. These are the foundations. This is what we need to build on. And inshallah, in the next episode, we are going to continue to see what we build after this foundation. Make sure that you've got these right. And a short, quick recap: oneness of Allah, prophethood, and the life hereafter. These are the foundations that make you a strong young man and a strong young lady in Islam. Look forward to seeing you again in future episodes, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.